this Friday at 10 a.m. to 12 p.m. where we will be focusing on the disabled community. Participants include Executive Director Ms. Lilliclaire Bellamy, Mrs. Dolary Hopkinson, Public Educational Documentalist at the Jamaica National Commission, UNESCO, Mr. Vivian Blake, Education Officer from the Special Education Unit at the Ministry of Education, Ms. Shireen Gordon, Vice Principal of the Salvation Army School for the Blind, Mrs. Latoya Blackwood Meeks, Chairman of the Book Industry Association of Jamaica, BIAJ, Ms. Carol Newman, General Manager from the Jamaica Copyright Licensing Agency, JAMCOPY. And we also have representative from the World Intellectual Property Organization, that's JIPO, and he is Mr. Dominic Matter. So we are in for an exciting discussion, and we want to continue to promote intellectual property
Carol, I'm looking in the chat, man.
Morning.
Hi, good morning, how are you?
I'm good, and you?
I am doing okay.
Yes, go ahead.
I'm here to copyright a trademark for my patent.
Yes.
You want to copyright a trademark for your patent?
Yes.
Alright, tell me exactly what it is that you want to do.
I have a logo and I want to get it registered.
Okay, so that's a copyright, not patent. That's actually a trademark. So logos are trademark.
I've allowed you to
Oh, so you're
unmute
telling me
on
that
the
all
so
I
you
need
can
is
go
just a
ahead and speak.
trademark?
Yes, that's all you need.
You know, it's a little confusing. I would hope that you
Yes.
guys would have some form of workshop or webinar or something.
Yes,
Just
it
to
is.
inform us of what is happening.
It is, and I'm happy that you said that because we will be having our IP week this week, our annual IP week,
Okay.
starting the 23rd of April until the 2nd of May.
Mm-hmm.
We will be on all the social media platforms, Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, I believe Twitter as well.
Oh,
So you
okay.
can just go over there and just follow us, and you can always see the live events that are going to be on.
And what's the date again?
The 23rd of April until the 2nd of May.
Oh, thank you. I will surely be there.
You are most welcome. Please do go ahead and follow us, alright?
Oh, okay, I
Alright, let
will.
me just see your documents first. Alright, so just have a seat over there and I'll get someone to assist.
Okay.
Yeah, you hear anybody who speaks. Information is going on. Because I was trying to tell somebody. Yeah, Carol, I see Carol, I see DBS. My mic is still open, so you probably still hear me now.
Morning.
Hi, good morning, how are you?
I'm good, and you?
I am doing okay.
Awesome.
I'm here to copyright a trademark for my patent.
You want to copyright a trademark for your patent?
Yes.
Alright, tell me exactly what it is that you want to do.
I have a logo and I want to get it registered.
Okay, so that's a copyright, not patent. That's actually a trademark. So logos are trademark.
Oh, so you're telling me that all I need is just a trademark?
Yes, that's all you need.
You know, it's a little confusing. I would hope that you guys would have some form of workshop or webinar or something.
Yes,
Just
it
to
is.
inform us of what is happening.
It is, and I'm happy that you said that because we will be having our IP week this week, our annual IP week,
Okay.
starting the 23rd of April until the 2nd of May.
Mm-hmm.
We will be on all the social media platforms, Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, I believe Twitter as well.
Oh,
So you
okay.
can just go over there and just follow us, and you can always see the live events that are going to be on.
And what's the date again?
The 23rd of April until the 2nd of May.
Oh, thank you. I will surely be there.
You are most welcome. Please do go ahead and follow us, alright?
Oh, okay, I
Alright,
will.
let me just see your documents first. Alright, you just have a seat over there and I'll get someone to assist.
Okay.
Morning.
Hi, good morning, how are you?
I'm good, and you?
I am doing okay.
Awesome.
I'm here to copyright a trademark for my patent.
You want to copyright a trademark for your patent?
Yes.
Alright, tell me exactly what it is that you want to do.
I have a logo and I want to get it registered.
Okay, so that's a copyright, not patent. That's actually a trademark. So
Oh.
logos are trademark.
Oh, so you're telling me that all I need is just a trademark?
Yes, that's all you need.
Click on
You know,
advanced
it's a
in the
little
bottom right.
confusing. I would hope that you guys would have some form of workshop or webinar or something.
Yes,
Just
it
to
is.
inform us of what is happening.
It is, and I'm happy that you said that because we will be having our IP week this week, our annual IP week,
Okay.
starting the 23rd of April until the 2nd of May.
Mm-hmm.
We will be on all the social media platforms, Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, I believe Twitter as well.
Oh,
So you
okay.
can just go over there and just follow us and you can always see the live events that are going to be on.
And what's the date again?
The 23rd of April until the 2nd of May.
Oh, thank you. I will surely be
You
there.
are most welcome. Please do go ahead and follow us, alright?
Okay, I
Alright, let
will.
me just see your documents, please. Alright, you just have a seat over there and I'll get someone to assist you.
Okay.
Hello everyone, I am Chantal English, Copyright and Related Rights Manager here at the Jamaica Intellectual Property Office. Every year we celebrate Intellectual Property Week in the last week of April. We also celebrate World Book and Copyright Day, April 23rd every year. Now this year we'll be focusing on creating copyright compliance through access, the Marrakesh Treaty. And the Marrakesh Treaty focuses on access to works, published works for persons who are blind or visually impaired. So we are inviting you to join the conversation this Friday at 10 a.m. to 12 p.m. where we will be focusing on the disabled communities. Participants include Executive Director Ms. Lilliclare Bellamy, Mrs. Dolary Hopkinson, Public Educational Documentalist at the Jamaica National Commission, UNESCO, Mr. Vivian Blake, Education Officer from the Special Education Unit at the Ministry of Education, Ms. Shereen Gordon, Vice Principal of the Salvation Army School for the Blind, Mrs. Latoya Blackwood Meeks, Chairman of the Book Industry Association of Jamaica, BIAJ, Ms. Carol Newman, General Manager from the Jamaica Copyright Licensing Agency, JIPO. And we also have representative from the World Intellectual Property Organization, that's JIPO, and he is Mr. Dominic Matter. So we are in for an exciting discussion and we want to continue to promote intellectual property among everyone in Jamaica for citizens to understand and to appreciate the importance of intellectual property, and more so this year we're focusing on the disabled community and specifically the Marrakesh Treaty. So we look forward to having you join the conversation. Hello everyone, I am Chantal English, Copyright and Related Rights Manager here at the Jamaica Intellectual Property Office. Every year we celebrate Intellectual Property Week in the last week of April. We also celebrate World Book and Copyright Day, April 23rd every year. Now this year we'll be focusing on creating copyright compliance through access, the Marrakesh Treaty. And the Marrakesh Treaty focuses on access to works, published works for persons who are blind or visually impaired. So we are inviting you to join the conversation this Friday at 10 a.m. to 12 p.m. where we will be focusing on the disabled communities. Participants include Executive Director Ms. Lilliclare Bellamy, Mrs. Dolary Hopkinson, Public Educational Documentalist at the Jamaica National Commission, UNESCO, Mr. Vivian Blake, Education Officer from the Special Education Unit at the Ministry of Education, Ms. Shereen Gordon, Vice Principal of the Salvation Army School for the Blind, Mrs. Latoya Blackwood Meeks, Chairman of the Book Industry Association of Jamaica, BIAJ, Ms. Carol Newman, General Manager from the Jamaica Copyright Licensing Agency, JIPO. And we also have representative from the World Intellectual Property Organization, that's JIPO, and he is Mr. Dominic Matter. So we are in for an exciting discussion and we want to continue to promote intellectual property among everyone in Jamaica for citizens to understand and to appreciate the importance of intellectual property, and more so this year we're focusing on the disabled community and specifically the Marrakesh Treaty. So we look forward to having you join the conversation. Hello everyone, I am Chantal English, Copyright and Related Rights Manager here at the Jamaica Intellectual Property Office. Every year we celebrate Intellectual Property Week in the last week of April. We also celebrate World Book and Copyright Day, April 23rd every year. Now this year we'll be focusing on creating copyright compliance through access, the Marrakesh Treaty. and the Marrakesh Treaty focuses on access to works, published works for persons who are blind or visually impaired. So we are inviting you to join the conversation this Friday at 10 a.m. to 12 p.m. where we will be focusing on the disabled communities. Participants include Executive Director Ms. Lillicare Bellamy, Mrs. Dolary Hopkinson, Public Educational Documentalist at the Jamaica National Commission, UNESCO, Mr. Vivian Blake, Education Officer from the Special Education Unit at the Ministry of Education, Ms. Shereen Gordon, Vice Principal of the Salvation Army School for the Blind, Mrs. Latoya Blackwood Meeks, Chairman of the Book Industry Association of Jamaica, BIAJ, Ms. Carol Newman, General Manager from the Jamaica Copyright Licensing Agency, JAMCOPY. And we also have representative from the World Intellectual Property Organization, that's JIPO, and he is Mr. Dominic Matter. So we are in for an exciting discussion, and we want to continue to promote intellectual property among everyone in Jamaica for citizens to understand and to appreciate the importance of intellectual property, and more so this year we're focusing on the disabled community and specifically the Marrakesh Treaty. So we look forward to having you join the conversation. Hello everyone, I am Chantal English, Copyright and Related Rights Manager here at the Jamaica Intellectual Property Office. Every year we celebrate Intellectual Property Week in the last week of April. We also celebrate World Book and Copyright Day, April 23rd every year. Now this year, we'll be focusing on creating copyright compliance through access, the Marrakesh Treaty. And the Marrakesh Treaty focuses on access to published work for persons who are blind or visually impaired. So we are inviting you to join the conversation this Friday at 10 a.m. to 12 p.m. where we will be focusing on the disabled communities. Participants include Executive Director Ms. Lillicare Bellamy, Mrs. Dolary Hopkinson, Public Educational Documentalist at the Jamaica National Commission, UNESCO, Mr. Vivian Blake, Education Officer from the Special Education Unit at the Ministry of Education, Ms. Shereen Gordon, Vice Principal of the Salvation Army School for the Blind, Mrs. Latoya Blackwood Meeks, Chairman of the Book Industry Association of Jamaica, BIAJ, Ms. Carol Newman, General Manager from the Jamaica Copyright Licensing Agency, JAMCOPY. And we also have representative from the World Intellectual Property Organization, that's JIPO, and he is Mr. Dominic Matter. So we are in for an exciting discussion, and we want to continue to promote intellectual property among everyone in Jamaica for citizens to understand and to appreciate the importance of intellectual property, and more so this year we're focusing on the disabled community and specifically the Marrakesh Treaty. So we look forward to having you join the conversation. Hello everyone, I am Chantal English, Copyright and Related Rights Manager here at the Jamaica Intellectual Property Office. Every year we celebrate Intellectual Property Week in the last week of April. We also celebrate World Book and Copyright Day, April 23rd every year. Now this year, we'll be focusing on creating copyright compliance through access, the Marrakesh Treaty. And the Marrakesh Treaty focuses on access to works, published work for persons who are blind or visually impaired. So we are inviting you to join the conversation this Friday at 10 a.m. to 12 p.m. where we will be focusing on the disabled communities. Participants include Executive Director Ms. Lillicare Bellamy, Mrs. Dolary Hopkinson, Public Educational Documentalist at the Jamaica National Commission, UNESCO, Mr. Vivian Blake, Education Officer from the Special Education Unit at the Ministry of Education, Ms. Shereen Gordon, Vice Principal of the Salvation Army School for the Blind, Mrs. Latoya Blackwood Meeks, Chairman of the Book Industry Association of Jamaica, BIAJ, Ms. Carol Newman, General Manager from the Jamaica Copyright Licensing Agency, JAMCOPY. And we also have representative from the World Intellectual Property Organization, that's JIPO, and he is Mr. Dominic Matter. So we are in for an exciting discussion, and we want to continue to promote intellectual property among everyone in Jamaica for citizens to understand and to appreciate the importance of intellectual property, and more so this year we're focusing on the disabled community and specifically the Marrakesh Treaty. So we look forward to having you join the conversation. Hello everyone, I am Chantal English, Copyright and Related Rights Manager here at the Jamaica Intellectual Property Office. Every year we celebrate Intellectual Property Week in the last week of April. We also celebrate World Book and Copyright Day, April 23rd every year. Now this year we'll be focusing on creating copyright compliance through access, the Marrakesh Treaty. And the Marrakesh Treaty focuses on access to works, published works for persons who are blind or visually impaired. So we are inviting you to join the conversation this Friday at 10 a.m. to 12 p.m. where we will be focusing on the disabled communities. Participants include Executive Director Ms. Leclerc Bellamy, Mrs. Dolary Hopkinson, Public Educational Documentalist at the Jamaica National Commission, UNESCO, Mr. Vivian Blake, Education Officer from the Special Education Unit at the Ministry of Education, Ms. Shireen Gordon, Vice Principal of the Salvation Army School for the Blind, Mrs. Latoya Blackwood Meeks, Chairman of the Book Industry Association of Jamaica, BIAJ, Ms. Carol Newman, General Manager from the Jamaica Copyright Licensing Agency, JAMCOPY. And we also have representatives from the World Intellectual Property Organization, that's JIPO, and he is Mr. Dominic Matter. So we are in for an exciting discussion, and we want to continue to promote intellectual property among everyone in Jamaica for citizens to understand and to appreciate the importance of intellectual property. And more so this year, we're focusing on the disabled community and specifically the Marrakesh Treaty. So we look forward to having you join the conversation. Hello everyone, I am Chantal English, Copyright and Related Rights Manager here at the Jamaica Intellectual Property Office. Every year we celebrate Intellectual Property Week in the last week of April. We also celebrate World Book and Copyright Day, April 23rd every year. Now this year we'll be focusing on creating copyright compliance through access, the Marrakesh Treaty. And the Marrakesh Treaty focuses on access to works, published works for persons who are blind or visually impaired. So we are inviting you to join the conversation this Friday at 10 a.m. to 12 p.m. where we will be focusing on the disabled communities. Participants include Executive Director Ms. Leclerc Bellamy, Mrs. Dolary Hopkinson, Public Educational Documentalist at the Jamaica National Commission, UNESCO, Mr. Vivian Blake, Education Officer from the Special Education Unit at the Ministry of Education, Ms. Shireen Gordon, Vice Principal of the Salvation Army School for the Blind, Mrs. Latoya Blackwood Meeks, Chairman of the Book Industry Association of Jamaica, BIAJ, Ms. Carol Newman, General Manager from the Jamaica Copyright Licensing Agency, JAMCOPY. And we also have representatives from the World Intellectual Property Organization, that's JIPO, and he is Mr. Dominic Matter. So we are in for an exciting discussion, and we want to continue to promote intellectual property among everyone in Jamaica for citizens to understand and to appreciate the importance of intellectual property. And more so this year, we're focusing on the disabled community and specifically the Marrakesh Treaty. So we look forward to having you join the conversation. Hello everyone, I am Chantal English, Copyright and Related Rights Manager here at the Jamaica Intellectual Property Office. Every year we celebrate Intellectual Property Week in the last week of April. We also celebrate World Book and Copyright Day, April 23rd every year. Now this year we'll be focusing on creating copyright compliance through access, the
Okay, so good afternoon, everyone. Right, so welcome everyone. I'm President. Good morning, welcome, and thanks for joining us. This is our first event for our IP Week 2021, Intellectual Property Week 2021. I'm glad that you could be here with us. So happy World Book and Copyright Day to everyone. And thanks for joining us for this important discussion as we kick off, let's say, World Book and Copyright Day, April 23. And we also, of course, are kicking off with this event this morning, Jamaica Intellectual Property Week 2021, right? My name is Marcus Goff. I'm Deputy Director, Legal Counsel here at the Jamaica Intellectual Property Office, coming to you live from Kingston, Jamaica. And with me here in JIPO Studios, I have Ms. Chantal English, who is our Copyright and Related Rights Manager at JIPO. And we also, of course, have a distinguished panel of speakers today who will be talking in this presentation this morning on the topic of creating copyright compliance through access to Marrakesh Treaty. Today, of course, we're looking at the intersection of copyright and related rights. We're looking at the Marrakesh Treaty. So we'll be hearing about what that treaty is and how it has been designed at the international level to increase the access to copyright works by blind persons, right? And so we're very glad to be able to be focusing on this issue today, as we recognize that it is crucial for our nation to advance. It is part of JIPO's mandate, of course, to ensure access for all, right? And of course, we want to know that the IP system is flexible and takes into account, of course, those who are among our blind and deaf community members as well. So we'll be hearing this morning from Ms. Dullery Hopkinson, who will be bringing the UNESCO World Book and Copyright Day message on behalf of the UNESCO. We'll be hearing from Ms. Shireen Gordon-White, the Vice Principal of the Salvation Army School for the Blind. We'll be hearing as well from Mrs. Latoya West Blackwood, the Chairman of the Book Industry Association of Jamaica, as well as from Ms. Carol Newman, the General Manager of the Jamaica Copyright Licensing Agency, JAMCOPY. We'll also be joined by Mr. Vivian Blake, Education Officer in the Special Education Unit, Ministry of Education, Youth and Information. And we'll of course have a presentation by Ms. Chantal English, as I mentioned earlier, of JIPO, and also Mr. Dominic Matar, who we welcome from the WIPO Accessible Books Consortium. So the aim of the discussion this morning is really just to, let's say, look at this issue of how we can bridge the gap that exists between access to copyright works for blind and deaf persons and the rights of copyright owners. And so I want to, of course, thank and welcome all our presenters too for joining us this morning. Look forward to seeing you all when you present, right? So I'm going to ask each person that when they're presenting just to, speak for 15 minutes maximum, and we're going to ask you to share your video as well. We want to have a discussion format, want to keep it very interactive, right? So we're going to ask persons to keep their presentations brief, and then we can have time for interactive discussion thereafter, all right? So again, thanks for joining us. We're going to go right into the presentations. I also want to, of course, thank our translators or interpreters. So English, are they here with us? I'm not sure if I can see.
I believe they are online. Let me just double check.
I don't see. We probably would need to see some video, but we have arranged translation for today as well, right? Sign language interpretation, so that I am hoping that we will be able to bring that to you. So that is also what we wanted to ensure, of course, we have available today for this important discussion and to ensure the inclusion of our representatives from the deaf community. So I see Miss Blackwood, right? Morning, Toya. I am looking though for the translators. So maybe we can just have a moment. I don't want it to start without ensuring full participation, right? So let me see here a long list of persons. So I just want to allow for us to ensure we have our interpreters on screen, right? So just give us a couple minutes just to sort out that part. All right. Let's see. Okay. Okay, Mr. Hugh Spencer, I think, right? Okay. So, Mr. Hugh Spencer, yes, sir. You should be able to be on video now, sir. Or mom. Here you are. Okay. Hi. Sorry about that. Okay. So we're good to go now? All right, thank you. All right, so I'm going to be a brief introduction again to ensure again full participation. Right. So welcome again to our first event for our Intellectual Property Week 2021. Thanks for joining us, and also happy World Book and Copyright Day 2021. This is the first event, as of our Jamaica Intellectual Property Week 2021, which runs from today, April 23rd, to next week, Sunday, the 2nd of May. You can visit our website for more information on the details of the activities for the week, www.jipo.gov.jm. Right, so we'll be talking today, as I said, about the very important issue of how to increase access to copyright works for deaf and blind persons. And so I say I'm going to introduce the speakers, and we look forward to a very interactive discussion with all present. All right. So I must first apologize for the absence of our executive director, Mr. Vivian Blake, who's not able to join us today, and did ask me to apologize on her behalf and to bring greetings on her behalf and on behalf of JIPO to you all as well. So I just want to say welcome again all for joining us. Each of the presenters, I won't go over their names, but we will introduce them in due course. And thanks again for joining us for the kickoff event for our IP Week 2021. Okay, I'm going to invite then Mrs. Dulary Hopkinson. She's going to share the World Book and Copyright Day message. It is pre-recorded, so we're going to play that now for you. Of course, this is a UNESCO day, so this is the message from the UNESCO headquarters to celebrate this day that we are also celebrating with UNESCO. So let's please sit back and hear the message from Ms. Dulary Hopkinson, public education documentalist at the Jamaica National Commission for UNESCO.
Good morning. I am Dulary Hopkinson, public education documentalist with the Jamaica National Commission for UNESCO. On the occasion of World Book and Copyright Day, I am delivering a message from our Director General, Ms. Audrey Azuli. In these uncertain times, many are turning to books to help them deal with lockdown and anxiety. Indeed, books have the unique ability both to entertain and to teach. They are at once a means of exploring realms beyond our personal experience through exposure to different authors, universes, and cultures, and the means of accessing the deepest recesses of our inner selves. Page by page, books light the path for us to roam, unbound by time or by borders. In other words, they give us freedom. It is the magic of books that we need now, at a time when we are all reminded of the cardinal importance of literature, and indeed of all the arts in our lives. In celebrating books, we are also celebrating their authors, who provide us with snippets of life and with insight into different realities. They give us a window onto the world, a view of existence. We are also paying homage to all the professions associated with books: editing, publishing, and translation. These fields make it possible to disseminate our literary heritage, allow new creations to find a place for their expression, and enable the spread of ideas. These professions must be protected and their value acknowledged. This is all the truer in the midst of the coronavirus pandemic, which poses a profound and lasting threat to the system of connection that is culture. That is why UNESCO supports the work of publishers through undertakings such as its partnership with the International Federation of Library Associations and Institutions and the International Publishers Association. The power of reading must be fully harnessed. We must ensure access to books so that everyone can take refuge in reading and find in it a source of dreams, knowledge, and reflection. This is the significance of the commitment made by Kuala Lumpur, which on 23rd April becomes the World Book Capital. UNESCO so designated the city because of its determination to promote literacy and foster the development of an inclusive book culture. At a time when reading is utterly invaluable, the vital importance of our common commitment to integration in and through reading becomes crystal clear. For this year's edition of World Book and Copyright Day, I thus encourage each and every one of you to pick up a book, start turning its pages, and draw from it the breath of fresh air, which will help to sustain you now and in the future. Happy World Book and Copyright Day. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Mrs. Larry Hopkinson, and thank you very much, UNESCO. Again, each year we try to support this activity, and we're glad to be able to, have it coincide with IP Week each year and World IP Day. So thanks very much again to Mrs. Hopkinson and for UNESCO for joining us, of course, and partnering with us in this celebration, first event for IP Week 2021. Okay, so I'm going to go into the program, and I say continuing as time is going. So I'm going to invite now Mrs. Shireen Gordon-White, the Vice Principal of the Salvation Army School for the Blind, us to share again insights and perspectives from her vantage point on this topic. And again, that will hopefully stimulate discussion later on. So welcome, Mrs. Gordon-White. Thanks for joining us this morning.
Good morning, everyone.
Morning.
I bring you warm greetings and best wishes on behalf of the Salvation Army School for the Blind and Visually Impaired Children. On this occasion, we celebrate UNESCO World Book and Copyright Day. The theme, Creating Copyright Compliance Through Access, the Marrakesh Treaty, is really something to celebrate. This treaty, since September 2016, facilitates greater access to persons who are blind and visually impaired to the printed world. This is a major breakthrough for persons who are blind and visually impaired. The Salvation Army School for the Blind and Visually Impaired Children is the only school of its kind in Jamaica. It caters for students who are blind and visually impaired, ages 5 to 21 years old. One of the major goals of the school is to have a high standard of academic competence and equality of our students with their sighted peers. The accomplishment of such goal is greatly hindered by the limited access to printed materials. It must be noted that the students at the school are required to learn the same content, utilize the same textbooks, and do the same examinations, including PEP and CSEC, as their peers. The Ministry of Education normally provides textbooks for students at the primary level, as well as a book rental scheme for the students at the secondary level. In the past, majority of these books could not be transcribed in Braille or large print due to copyright laws. This resulting in our students having little or no access to printed materials that is available to their sighted peers. The school strives for independence of our students, but with such limited access to educational materials, the students had to depend on readers. The school truly appreciates these readers, but the ideal is for the student to read for themselves. Research shows students who read independently become better readers, score higher on achievement tests in all subject areas, and have greater content knowledge than those who do not. In addition, students could not readily access the required textbooks and other reading materials at their convenience as their sighted peers. They were really at a disadvantage. It was also challenging for teachers to have readily available materials for their students to do independent work. I must admit that the teachers and other educators at the school were sometimes fearful of the law as we tried our best to bridge the gap. The Marrakesh Treaty is a blessing. It ensures that persons who are blind and visually impaired have sustainable access to published works on the same terms as sighted persons. Since September 2016, thank God, we no longer have to be mindful of copyright laws and be begging, waiting, and waiting some more for permission to transcribe printed materials in accessible formats for our students. It is my hope that further assistance will now be given to institutions such as ours to make printed materials more accessible to persons who are blind and visually impaired, as producing such materials can be costly and time-consuming. The next step is to make it mandatory for all publishers to have published materials accessible to persons who are blind and visually impaired, instead of leaving such a responsibility on others. Thank you, Jamaica Intellectual Property Office, JIPO, for the organization of this meeting and the inclusion of the Salvation Army School for the Blind and Visually Impaired Children in such important discussion. It is my hope that this meeting will provide the necessary framework to strengthen further support from JIPO as we strive for a vision of a world in which all persons can participate fully and equally in the political, economic, and cultural life of society. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Gordon White. Thank you very much for that. Nice and to the point. You know, we also want to recognize, of course, Mrs. Gordon White has a long, career in this sector, in this field. You know, over 26 years of experience working in the Jamaica School for the Blind organization, specializing in Braille literacy and the Braille literacy program. And this is what also we want to discuss too, how we can, make more material accessible. For example, I was asking the other day, just my colleague, is there a way that we could print the program in Braille? Maybe there's a software that you can just send into print and it prints in Braille. I'm not sure, but we'd love to explore again how technology, when we get to the discussion, right, can make it easy for us to be able to produce different information materials in accessible formats, So I look forward to talking about that with you when we get to that stage, man. Thanks very much. Okay, so I'm going to go into the program as well. Now we have a poem from one of our creatives in office here at JIPO, Miss Shanicia Wright. She joined us last year and has been working in the copyright and related rights unit at JIPO since then. I've been very instrumental in putting together this week with our IP Week committee and team. But now she's going to share her creative talents with a poem that she has written particularly for this occasion. So I want to welcome and invite Ms. Shanicia Wright, Copyright and Related Rights Secretary at JIPO, to share her original poem with us. Ms. Wright?
Thank you, Dr. Goff. Good morning, everyone. All right. Today, we celebrate World Book and Copyright Day. We celebrate the way we use our words to convey the feelings in our hearts, the way we bring to life our deepest thoughts. We celebrate the magic of how these words become animated in our minds. Hence, as we read, we see, we feel, we hear, we experience. We celebrate the adventures we embark on and the journeys we take as we turn a new page. We celebrate that reading unlocks limitless possibilities and that it's for everyone, everywhere, of every age. It's such a beautiful thing that everyone deserves a chance to experience. And so the Marrakesh Treaty came into existence. This provision aims to remove all barriers and limitations. And here we have yet another reason for celebration. Its main focus is on the blind, visually impaired, or those otherwise print disabled. Through this treaty, universal access to published works for all will be enabled. This will be made possible through increased and varied production formats such as digital audio and so much more. The only requirement is that it allows those with visual or print impairments easy and comfortable access to these works for sure. The Marrakesh Treaty will be an amazing addition to society as it comes with benefits of a great variety. It will provide for our VIPs, those with visual impairments or otherwise print disabled, greater access to education and foster inclusiveness through enhanced social integration and cultural participation. By access to leisure materials such as books, magazines, and newspapers, which play a vital function in entertainment, as well as the dissemination of cultural information. This increase will also strengthen their contributions to the economy through increased professional opportunities. The Marrakesh Treaty aims to increase the overall quality of life for our VIP communities. But wait, there's more. I told you it came with benefits galore. There's something to be gained for us too. The Marrakesh Treaty will increase awareness of the challenges faced by the VIP community. With greater understanding of this should come an increase in unity. The Marrakesh Treaty will also help with poverty alleviation, as it will benefit local copyright and publishing industries, helping to improve our economy as a nation. As you process this information, I hope it becomes clear why all of this is great reason for celebration. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Miss Shanicia Wright. An original poem there, right? Beautifully summarizing the Marrakesh Treaty, right? First time I'm hearing it, so really impressed, Miss Wright. Thanks for that. You know, just shows that there's talent in all of us, and even if you're working in another area where you don't necessarily get the chance to express yourself, it's important that we do try to find that creative expression and outlet to do so, right? It's a part of course, a human right and a human need as well. So thanks very much, Ms. Wright, for that. I'm glad to know that creativity abounds in our youth and particularly here at JIPO. Okay, so we're going to now make way for Ms. Chantal English. Ms. English is an attorney at law who has joined us at JIPO since last year as well. She is a graduate of the Newman Law School. She has been corporate and related rights manager at JIPO, leading the efforts since last year to improve the copyright framework, and is the one who is working on the act at present with a view to incorporating fully the provision of the Marrakesh Treaty. Ms. English is going to share with us now some insights on the treaty and generally on what JIPO is doing. Just to be clear, the Marrakesh Treaty focuses on the visually impaired or blind community, but our work at JIPO and the Copyright Act is focusing on increasing access to copyright works for blind and deaf persons as well. So Ms. English will speak about that now. So please sit back and Ms. English will share with you JIPO's work in this area. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Goff. Thank you for that introduction. And thank you everyone for joining the conversation this morning. We are so happy to have you. And let me just say happy World Book and Copyright Day. All right, so we're focusing on creating the theme this morning, creating copyright compliance through access to Marrakesh Treaty. Just a little overview of JIPO for persons who are online who doesn't know about JIPO. So the Jamaica Intellectual Property Office is an agency of the Ministry of Industry, Investment and Commerce. JIPO was established in January 2001 by the Jamaica Intellectual Property Act 2002. JIPO is responsible for administering intellectual property laws in Jamaica, public education, registration of trademarks, designs, patents, geographical indication, and the voluntary deposits of copyrights and related rights. And you will see voluntary here because copyright protection arises automatically upon the creation of a work. Now, a little about intellectual property. What is intellectual property? So intellectual property is a property right. It defines the creation of the mind, and it is the legal right to result from intellectual activities in the scientific, industrial, literary, musical, and dramatic field. And so this morning, our focus will be creating access to copyrighted materials. So some of the IP areas include copyright, patents, industrial designs, trademarks, geographical indications, but this morning we'll be focusing more on the copyright. So copyright, this is a legal right that allows creators of creative works to reproduce, distribute, perform their work, adapt their work, and communicate or make their work available to the public. Now, Section 6.1 of the Copyright Act of Jamaica defines copyright as a property right. And so when you have property, you can do whatever you please to do with your property. And as a copyright owner, you have certain rights. You have a moral right and you have an economic right. But I'm going to focus more on the economic right this morning, which are they're highlighted in Section 9.1 of the Copyright Act of Jamaica 1993. So the owners of the copyrights in a work, they have the exclusive right to authorize persons to do any of the following. So to copy the work, they can issue the work to the public, perform the work, play or show the work in public, broadcast the work, adopt the work, or make the work available on demand, which is making the work available on the internet, and by adopting the work, taking the work from one form to another. For example, a book into a movie. And so the copyright owner has all these rights. But the Marrakesh Treaty provides some exceptions to this. So we're looking more in detail on the Marrakesh Treaty. So the Marrakesh Treaty to facilitate access to published works for persons who are blind, visually impaired, or otherwise print disabled was signed on June 27, 2017 in Marrakesh, which is in Morocco. So the aim of this treaty is to provide equal opportunity and full access to copyrighted materials to those who are visually impaired and print disabled. So the Copyright Amendment Act in 2015 makes provisions for persons with a print and a hearing disability. And this is reflected in our Section 65A and our Section 65B of the Act. Right, Section 65A focuses on individuals with a print disability. And it's important for us to understand who are the persons who fall within this category. And so the provision defines a person with a print disability where a person is blind, a person suffers from severe impairment of sight, is unable to hold or to manipulate printed material, or is unable to focus or move his eyes, he or her eyes, or suffer from any disability with respect to visual perception. Now, Section 65A1 states that an authorized body may make or supply copies or adaptations of published literary or dramatic works for the purpose of providing persons who have a print disability with copies that is in an accessible format without infringing any copyrights in literary or dramatic work. Earlier I mentioned that the copyright owner has certain rights. And so without what Section 65A1 is saying is that the authorized body may do any of the rights that the copyright owner has without seeking permission, which would not consider to be an infringement of the copyright in the literary or the dramatic works. And by literary and dramatic works, it's reference to the meaning of literary dramatic work as highlighted in Section 2 of the Berne Convention. The treaty, so it's important for us to understand who an authorized body is. And so the treaty defines an authorized entity or authorized body as an entity that is authorized and recognized by the government to provide education, institutional training, adaptive reading or information, access to information to beneficiary persons on a non-profit basis. An authorized entity includes a government institution or a non-profit organization that provides the same services to the beneficiary persons as one of its primary activities or institutional obligations. So if the person with the print disability is unable to do that, an authorized body can act on behalf of that beneficiary person. Section 65A is applied subject to the following conditions: that the authorized body has made reasonable efforts to obtain a copy of the completed work in an accessible format at a reasonable commercial price, but has been unable to do so. And the copies are provided only to persons with a print disability. So where a person acting on behalf of the authorized body makes a copy or adaptation of a published literary or dramatic work, the authorized body shall, or as is reasonably practicable, take the necessary steps to notify the copyright owner of the making of the copy or adaptation. This is very important as we recognize that there must be a balance with the owners of the copyrights and also the users of the material. And so important steps must be taken to notify the copyright owner of the making of copies or adaptation of the work. At the end of the day, copyright owners, as I mentioned before, has certain rights, they're economic rights, and so they should be notified of any steps that are taken to use their works. So if any person with a print disability to whom a copy is provided is required to pay for the copy, the payment required is no higher than a sum consisting of the cost of the production of the copy and a reasonable contribution to the general expenses of the authorized body with no element of profit. So there must be, again, the act seemed to strike a balance between the user and the copyright owner. An authorized body may also copy a work containing an electronic medium for the purpose of converting the work to an accessible format, and also circumvention of technological protection measures to access copyrighted material for any purposes referred to in Section 65A1 shall not be treated as a commission of an offense or an infringement of any copyright in the work. And so where there would be protection or encryption, prevent access, or technological protection to protect the work from access, the Act provides an exception to this for persons who are visually impaired, blind, or print disabled. So the Marrakesh Treaty really focuses on the blind, visually impaired, and the print disabled. However, for our recent amendments, Section 65B, we also look at the hearing disabled or the deaf. So here, a person with a hearing disability is a person who suffers from severe or profound deafness or is unable to discriminate speech in a meaningful way from other sounds. And Section 65B of the Amendment Act 2015 speaks to persons with a hearing disability. So a person with a hearing disability, an authorized body, which I had mentioned before, or an organization acting on that person's behalf and approved for that purpose by an authorized body may, without infringing the copyright in the work, translate, and we're adapt or reproduce in sign language. And this is evident this morning as we have our own sign language team taking part for us today. So they can translate, adopt, or reproduce in sign language a literary or dramatic work, other than a cinematographic work, which is movements, pictures in sign language, either live or in a format specially designed for persons with a hearing disability. So at JIPO, we continue to work towards ensuring that the visually impaired, the print disabled, the blind, and those that hearing disability has access to copyrighted works. JIPO is currently finalizing the copyright bill to amend the Copyright Act of Jamaica 1993 to provide more comprehensive and robust provisions to address the needs of the disabled community. Realize that there's a need for a balance in our society, and that there's a need for us to have continuous work as it relates to our disabled communities. And so, focusing on the Marrakesh Treaty, we have been doing works and we have been dialoguing with the disabled communities, working with the Ministry of Education to ensure that individuals have access to the material. Another aspect of the Marrakesh Treaty is the cross-border exchange of material. So it provides easy access to imports and exports of copyrighted works. And so we at JIPO continue to work towards creating an environment where everyone feels appreciated, also balanced, where the users of the copyright works are using the material in the way that they ought to, seeking the required permission, but also recognizing that there are exceptions to the use of copyrighted material for persons who are a part of these communities. So thank you, and just want to point out that if it is that you have any other questions from this webinar, you can always feel free to call us and we'll be happy to have a conversation around same. Over to you, Dr. Love.
Thank you so much, Ms. English, for sharing that information on the Marrakesh Treaty, right? And on what also JIPO is doing and Jamaica is doing, right, to implement that treaty. And as we've said, to go beyond that treaty, really, to provide also for increased access and accessibility for our deaf community members. So important work that we're doing at JIPO. And of course, we want to, get the feedback from persons and stakeholders. And what we also want to do is go beyond the law as well, right? Just amending the law alone doesn't necessarily fix the problem. But being able to go beyond that to now actually seek to implement a program, a sustainable program that can facilitate access to those who need it in accessible format copies is what we want to really, start that discussion and sustain it going forward, So thanks again for Ms. English for sharing the Copyright Act perspective, which already allows for certain flexibilities, but we also, let's say, are on a journey to increase access, increase the usability of the system, right? All right, so I'm going to now introduce then Mrs. Latoya West Blackwood. Mrs. Latoya West Blackwood is the chairman of the Book Industry Association of Jamaica. She is a publishing consultant and a nonprofit leader whose work focuses on gender equality, social justice, as well as literacy as tools for transformation and sustainable development. She's a 2020 Yale Scholar, Yale School of Management International Publishing Leader Awardee for book publishing, and an executive board member of Publisher, a global organization committed to gender equality and diversity in the creative industries. She served as a member of the National Consultative Committee for the USAID Latin America and Caribbean READS project, implemented by EduConnect Jamaica, which focused on improving research in early grade reading to support the production of culturally relevant materials for young readers. And it closed with the historic staging of Jamaica's first early grade reading conference in 2018. She's a professional fellow and member of the inaugural class of the Young Leaders of America's Initiative. And she also represents the island's alumni of all U.S. State Department-sponsored academic, cultural, and business exchange programs. She is a youth-inspired and research-driven nonprofit entrepreneur. She's worked in communities across Jamaica and is, of course, interested on behalf of BIAJ in seeing how they can further this interesting need for access. And so we're very pleased that we could have Ms. Westbackley with us. She has a very interesting perspective to share and is an important partner in this process moving forward.
Thank
Good morning,
you very much. Thank you very much, Marcus. And you could have just introduced me as Latoya, the girl who loves books.
Yeah.
Because that's what it's all about. So good morning again, everybody. Greetings to all the panelists and all the people who are joining in on the live. I must start out by wishing everyone a happy World Book and Copyright Day, and to commend JIPO for its consistency in, you know, the partnership with the different stakeholders. I know it might not be public knowledge to everybody, but what I was really impressed about by Marcus and his team is that they took a really inclusive approach in informing the agenda today, reaching out to the different stakeholders, people living with disabilities, the organizations that represent their interests, and also the organizations that would, you know, represent the interests of the creators, content creators, and those who are seeking to protect copyright. That I think is significant, even in having an interpreter on the call today, because we can't just talk about inclusion. We have to actually make it a part of what we do. So really high commendations to the team on that. I'm very happy to see all the work that's happening. Now, to start out, you know, for my presentation this morning, I really wanted to talk, you know, I didn't bother to do a PowerPoint. I really want to reason with us, and I will start out by reading an excerpt from a statement put out by the World Book and by the International Publishers Association to mark the day. BIAJ, as some of you will know on this call, is the region's first official member of the IPA, and thanks to the encouragement of organizations like JIPO and JAMCOPY, we were able to, you know, seamlessly make that transition and to become a voice for the region, followed now by Trinidad and Tobago. So in the statement that was released today, it says, on World Book and Copyright Day 2021, the IPA pays tribute to publishers' unstinting positive contribution to the world during a year in which our societies have faced unprecedented pressure. Despite the COVID pandemic, publishers everywhere have continued to bring new talent, well-loved favorites to light, and they have empowered vital, trustworthy research and have innovatively enabled learners to pursue their education from afar. These undertakings have been possible because international copyright treaties and national laws allow publishers to invest in original authorship and new works of the mind. The global copyright framework provides the foundation that publishers depend on to invest in publishing books that educate, enlighten, and entertain audiences around the world, as well as the new technologies to improve their widespread availability and accessibility. And then it goes on to say that the global copyright framework is more important than ever to ensure that publishers can continue to sustainably provide readers, learners, teachers, parents, scientists, researchers, and society as a whole with the publications they need. And closing out, Jessica Sanger, the chair of IPA's copyright committee, says this ongoing global crisis has demonstrated how much value publishers bring to readers all over the world. Publishers can continue to fulfill this vital role in society because the global copyright framework enables them to innovate and to adapt to even major challenges. This World Book and Copyright Day, we should celebrate how copyright law has enabled publishers to deliver all the diverse literature, vital research, and educational resources they have done and continue to provide, sometimes against the odds. And on that last note, I mean, Jamaica's case is one of going against the odds at all time. The Book Industry Association of Jamaica is happy to exist within a framework, a national framework like the one JAMCOPY has, JIPO and JAMCOPY has championed, which actually going to regional meetings like the one held in 2019 in the Dominican Republic, where we met with WIPO, IFRO, and IP as guests of the IP. We saw firsthand that the framework that exists for Jamaica is actually the leader, if not one of the leaders in the region in terms of the standard that people are working towards. So from a BIAJ perspective, our participation in this discussion today is really to see how we can move from everything that we have agreed on and some of those points in terms of our mandate of promoting a reading and knowledge culture would go to some of the points made in a report put out, I think, by Digital Foundation, UNICEF, and another partner in 2018. That points to the fact that globally, about 15% of the world's population is living with a disability. Millions of those, maybe under 2 million, would be children directly impacted. And when we take it at home and look at the matter of education, access to education and literature in general remains a significant barrier to people living with disabilities achieving their full potential. So when the BIAJ thinks of promoting a reading and knowledge culture, it's not just about thinking about those who we can see normally well represented. It is also looking at those who are not so much represented, but need to be thought of and included in this mandate as the world becomes, we have been talking about knowledge and reading culture, but that is the reality of the world, particularly looking at this period of COVID-19 and even post-COVID-19. So the situation locally looks like this, where in terms of educational achievement, most people living with disabilities are between the ages of 0 to 24. Combined, let's say just over 30% of them are able to access primary and secondary school education. When you break that out, you're talking about 20% at the 0 to 14 and 13% at the 15 to 24. Now, we don't think that's acceptable, and we definitely want to do anything that will contribute to making the tools and resources available to this community that they need to truly achieve their full potential. And so what are some of the things that we have done? We have on the call this morning the Salvation Army School. We're very happy to see them because I can refer to one of our members, Natalie Rochester, who is an international development consultant, but also an author and the owner of Mango Tales. She published the Hazel Hummingbird book. And, she spoke to us about her desire tying into our lobbying about making content accessible for people living with disabilities. And so I believe it was in 2018, either before or during the time of our last Kingston Book Festival, that she actually worked with a unit at the Ministry of Education to make her book accessible. And I was able to convert the material. I had the pleasure of actually attending with her the presentation ceremony at the school. And I don't think, even in my own research and lobbying, etc., that the message of inclusion and the power of inclusion and access really came home to me in terms of what it can do, particularly for a child. Seeing her hand over the copies, and let's think of Jamaica's national bird, the hummingbird, the doctor bird. we just take it for granted that this is one of our national symbols, but it never came home to me so powerfully that there were children who had never seen, because of their disability, what that national symbol was. And so by her making the book available in a format that they could, without a reader, without anybody supporting them, they could actually read for the first time a book that was talking about our culture, our heritage, and they could experience that for themselves. That was one of the most powerful representations to me. And so I just want to see our members and all of us collectively continue on this path that treaties like Marrakesh allow, and our local or our national copyright framework, though Marrakesh is limited in some ways to the providing access for the blind community. Within our local framework, there are some provisions that have been made in terms of the deaf community. And so for us, through initiatives like Kingston Book Festival that we now hold biennially and will be having towards the end of this year virtually, or whatever the public health guidelines allow at that time, November 30th to December 5th, we want to continue to deepen our work in that way in terms of public education and engagement, and to continue to work with organizations like JIPO, like JAMCOPY, like the National Library, like the Salvation Army School, and others to see how we can move towards the dream of access to the reality of inclusion. And so I will round out my comments there, and thank you for giving me the time and the platform to present.
Thank you so much, Latoya. Very short and to the point, and your passion is palpable, which we need, and we want, we welcome that. So, as I said, to move it forward, we need the partnerships, right? We can't just do it in our own silos. And I think this is something that we have a common objective, on, and so I'm really glad that we have you and BIAJ on board. So thanks for those encouraging words.
Thank you. And quickly to answer Antoinette, a very good friend of the book industry and Kingston Book Festival's question in the chat. Yes, I believe that we stand to be guided like people like you, Antoinette, who are so prominent and active in your community, to help us to see, apart from, we spoke about the blind, but we, as we have also done work with the deaf community. We want to deepen and expand that work, seek out funding opportunities. And so your question about making reading material available in Jamaican Sign Language to help literacy is definitely something that we would love to explore.
Yes, and we want to recognize the Honorable Tony Turp. Ms. Aiken, thanks for joining us, Ms. Aiken. We always see you on national TV all the time. So thanks for joining us. We appreciate it and for contributing to the discussion. Want to recognize, of course, you having recently got the national awards. So glad you could join us. So a lot to think about. I do want to leave us more time than even I see allotted on the program for Q&A. And so I'm going to go right into our next presenter, right? Who is Ms. Carol Newman, General Manager of the Jamaica Copyright Licensing Agency, JAMCOPY. Ms. Newman has worked in the copyright industry's field for a long time. I won't tell you how long it would. You wouldn't believe me when you see her on screen. But she is representing not only JAMCOPY today, but also she's the Jamaican representative for the International Federation of Reproduction Rights Organizations, IFRO, who is a member of the Accessible Books Consortium, which is a global network of organizations working to increase access to books for blind and visually impaired persons. So we're very pleased again to have with us Ms. Newman, who has a wealth of information and institutional knowledge about this topic, and I know is also passionate about it as well. So good morning and welcome, Carol. Glad you could join us.
realized I had to turn my video on myself. Thank you very much for the introduction, Marcus. I am very happy to be here representing both JAMCOPI, the Jamaican Copyright Licensing Agency, as well as IFRO, the International Federation for Reproduction Rights Organizations. I have to say congratulations to JIPO for putting this program together and for the continuing insight that they provide in this area to the community at large, our authors and our publishers, as well as our community of persons who are blind and print disabled. So Marcus spoke about institutional knowledge and going way back. I don't know if I want to go into all of that, except first I'll tell you a little bit about JAMCOPI for those persons who may not have known of JAMCOPI before. So JAMCOPI, the Jamaican Copyright Licensing Agency, is the entity. It's a locally established entity. It represents the authors and publishers of print materials and image-based materials. And we are a collective management organization. We were established by creators and publishers to assist them to manage certain aspects of their copyright, specifically the reproduction right, which is the copying right. And we help authors and publishers by providing access to their materials through licensing solutions. And so JAMCOPI offers licensing solutions to institutions in particular. We also have issued a licensing solution to the government of Jamaica. Indeed, the government of Jamaica was the first to have received such a license back in 2001. And what we do basically is that we provide the license to enable users to be able to use and reuse the content, to make copies. And by copies, I mean not only photocopies, but copies could be digital copies, PDFing, scanning materials, and being able to legitimately distribute these materials. So as Chantal touched on it earlier, some of these rights are rights which belong to the creators and publishers of the material. And under the law, certain rights are reserved to these creators and publishers, and to use and reuse the materials in certain ways requires permission. And so JAMCOPI was set up by these creators and publishers to facilitate access to the materials and to provide these licensing solutions to enable easy, efficient access to these materials. So JAMCOPI was established back in 1998, and JAMCOPI is a member of the International Federation of Reproduction Rights Organizations, which is based in Brussels, and has in membership some 230 organizations, both other collective management organizations in other countries, as well as organizations representing rights holders. So for example, the International Publishers Association is a member of IFRO. The International Authors Forum, which represents the authors, is a member of IFRO, and so on and so forth. So just to set the context of who we are and what we do. So when JAMCOPI was established back in 1998, a decision was taken, a conscious decision was taken, that in the interest of the public good, in the interest of facilitating access to our blind and pre-disabled community, our licenses, all the licensing solutions that we provide would exempt blind and print-disabled persons. So the licenses basically are usually, the payment for the licensing is based on the number of persons in an institution. So for example, Let's take the University of the West Indies. They would have a license from Jam Copy, which enables them to do the legitimate printing, copying that they need to do for teaching and learning. But they wouldn't count blind and print disabled persons in that number that they're paying for. So if they under the license, they're allowed to do to convert materials into Braille, to make large print formats and other accessible formats to facilitate this community, but they weren't required to pay. So that was a policy decision that was taken by Jam Copy back in 1998. Another thing that Jam Copy did was back in June of 2011, there were discussions at JIPO about the TIGAR project, the Trusted Intermediary Global Accessible Resources Project. And this was set up to, again, facilitate access by our blind and print disabled community to materials, recognizing that they also have a right to be able to access materials just as their able-bodied persons who do not have this particular disability are able to. And therefore, this project was established by JIPO, and it was set up to, as I said, to facilitate access. And Jam Copy, when we learned about it through IFRO, we entered into an MOU with JIPO back in June 2011. As we were committed to the policy, to the principle of widening the choice of accessible versions of books being made available to print disabled persons. In not only in Jamaica, but meaning not only materials printed in Jamaica, but they could also access materials that were printed in other countries. And this project helped to facilitate the more efficient production of new accessible versions, and in a way helped to reduce duplication. And so we became very involved in that. We also entered, as a part of that process, entered into an MOU with the National Library. And that MOU also was signed back in 2011. And then even before that, actually, I remember attending meetings at the National Library with persons who were blind and otherwise print disabled. When the National Library started a DAISY project, that's when I first heard about DAISY and even knew that thing that this existed. But so I'm just kind of putting it out there, if you will, that we have always been committed to providing and facilitating access. And so when the TIGAR project turned or changed into the ABC, we also, by default, if you will, also became part of that, because our International Federation, IFRO, is one of the members of the advisory board of the ABC, and also actually has a permanent seat on that body. So Jam Copy was kept abreast of the developments in that regard, and have had some conversations with JIPO over the years about trying to get Jamaica to accede to the Marrakesh Treaty, which we deem as very important. Indeed, I think it was back in 2015, there was a conference held here in Kingston that JIPO co-sponsored with JIPO to talk about Marrakesh. And honestly, I expected that we would have acceded to Marrakesh long ago. Better late than never. I am very heartened to see the movements in this direction. And I continue to hope that very soon we will have acceded to the Marrakesh Treaty and it will be invoked. But I must say that JIPO had the foresight to have included in the 2015 amended Copyright Act certain provisions which kind of mirror the Marrakesh Treaty. So that's a good thing. Let's just move now to the to getting on board with the Marrakesh Treaty. Going back to the ABC, there are certain, and I won't speak much because I see that the speaker after me will speak to that. But I hope also that our local publishers, I've been kind of waving a flag at them for a while, will also take advantage of the opportunities that exist within the ABC, so that they can be in a better position to be able to provide these accessible materials. For its own part, through IFRO, there are materials available for visually impaired readers to have access to materials on copyright and collective management. And there are links on the IFRO website and also on the JAMCOPY website that persons, there's it is in various languages. There's Spanish Daisy book. There is that speaks about collective management. There is also the Daisy book in English as well that speaks about collective management in reprography. And there's also DD readers that you can download from the page as well. I think you need to have Firefox, I think, installed to be able to access it. And IFRA has also provided to ROs, including JAMCOPY, materials that can help us to help our authors and publishers in creating and facilitating access to works for print disabled persons. So all in all, I think this is a good conversation. I look forward to continuing the dialogue and of course, to provide any assistance and guidance that we can at JAMCOPY as we advance this whole process of creating and facilitating access to our rich and diverse cultural products here in Jamaica and those outside of our region, or those outside of Jamaica, and indeed outside of the region, to our nationals, so that they too can have access and experience the joy that Latoya spoke about regarding that particular publication. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Carol, for that. As I say, a lot of important information, that is not just an overnight journey, but it's coming from longer distance, so we're glad it's reached here, but as I say, quite a bit to go, but glad that you're still on board with us.
Yes, I'm here. And on behalf of JAMCOPY and IFRO.
And IFRO, right, because again, this solution needs just, I think, more than just us locally, it is a global context, it's a global problem, so I'm glad that we have global partners on board. So I'm really then going to segue into introducing our next panelist, Mr. Dominic Matar, who is representing the World Intellectual Property Organization, JIPO, Accessible Books Consortium. So they are also one of the key international partners in this whole landscape where we're trying to increase access to copyright works for the blind and deaf communities, but certainly for the blind communities in the context of JIPO ABC. So Mr. Matar joined JIPO in 2019. He is the product management officer for the JIPO Accessible Books Consortium, ABC. He manages the ABC Global Book Service. He holds a BA from Yale University and is currently pursuing a master's degree in information management systems from Harvard University's Extension School. He worked previously in various technical project and product management roles for Columbia Business School, Scholastic Inc., and the Cooper Union for the Advancement of Science and Art. Mr. Matar, and it's the first time on a JIPO platform. So welcome, sir. Welcome to IP Week and to World Book and Copyright Day with us here in Jamaica.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It's a great honor and a pleasure to be here. I want to thank you, Dr. Goff, for the invitation and the Jamaica Intellectual Property Office. Wishing everybody a happy World Book and Copyright Day. Thank you also to all my fellow panelists for all the interesting and diverse perspectives on these important topics. Just to try to pick up from where previous discussions were, as the product management officer, I'd like to introduce a little bit of some of the applied ways in which the Marrakesh Treaty can be put into practice. And I would do that by talking to you a little bit about what ABC, the Accessible Books Consortium, does. And thank you very much to Bertland for managing the PowerPoint. We were having some technical difficulties yesterday, so thank you, Bertland. So yeah, if we could go to the next slide, please. So the Marrakesh Treaty, Chantal gave a very great discussion on that. I'll keep it quite brief. WIPO administers the Marrakesh Treaty. As you all know, the blind and visually impaired population is very significant. The World Health Organization estimates that over 250 million people live with visual impairments around the world. And over 90% of them are in lower income countries. And the lack of access to books is a very real barrier to getting an education and leading an independent and productive life. So the Marrakesh Treaty has grown quite rapidly since it came into force. I believe it is WIPO's fastest growing treaty. There are currently 79 contracting parties covering 105 countries. That's because, taking into account the European Union. Okay, next slide, please. And ABC was established in 2014. It's led by WIPO. It's a public-private partnership in which that includes organizations that represent people with print disabilities, including the World Blind Union and IFRO and IFLA and a number of other organizations. ABC's goal is quite simply to increase the number of books worldwide in accessible formats that include Braille and audio and e-text, and to make them available. So it's both on the production and on the distribution and availability of those books. Next slide, please. ABC operates has three core services that it operates in. One is capacity building, one is the promotion of inclusive publishing, and the third one, which is the one that I'm most involved with, is the ABC Global Book Service. So I'll now delve a little bit more into those three branches of activities. Next slide, please. Thank you. So capacity building is So ABC offers training and technical assistance to specific projects in developing countries. The activities include training for NGOs and publishers and departments of education, funding provided towards the production of educational materials, training the trainers in the use of accessible devices, and also, of course, raising awareness of the Marrakesh Treaty. It generally follows a two-year cycle. So a call for submission is issued, and then we receive applications. Then there's a selection process. And once a project is selected for funding, then an agreement is signed between WIPO and the organization. And the project is then followed through for this two-year cycle, at the end of which there are deliverables that were previously agreed on The current cycle followed a call for submissions that was sent out in October 2019. So we're currently in the 2020 to 2021 production cycle or capacity building cycle. And basically the next round for calls for proposal would be happening in October of 2021. So, and then it would span the period of 2022 to 2023. So if you represent or if you know of organizations that would be interested in this, we would encourage you to, keep informed of this. You could subscribe to the ABC newsletter, and then that way you'll receive the next call for proposals, which is in a few months. Next slide, please. So from 2015 to 2020, more than 250 organizations in 17 countries have benefited from capacity building projects. Currently, there are 15 organizations that were selected from a total of the 44 applications we received following our call for proposals. We estimate that an additional 5,300 accessible educational titles will be produced by the end of this year through these projects. Within the context of COVID, we actually had to transition to a more of an online training system. So we've developed in association with, or in partnership with the DAISY Consortium, we've developed an online course on the production of accessible format books. It was just recently launched, and it's available in English and Spanish and French that have qualified for, or that have been selected for capacity building. Next slide, please. So since the very start of the capacity building, over 13,700 educational books have been produced. They're produced in the national languages of 17 countries, and an estimated 261 organizations have received training, 25 of which produced books. So through every capacity building project, there's a principal organization that is the lead organization, and then there are several others that receive training as part of the same operation. So we have 25 organizations that have been trained into the production of books, but a total of 261 organizations that received training. Next slide, please. I'm not sure if it's my internet, but could we jump to the next slide, please? Accessible publishing. There we go. Thank you. Another line of operation that ABC does is the promotion of accessible publishing, as was mentioned previously by Ms. Newman. So ABC has developed a charter for accessible publishing that contains 8 aspirational principles for publishers to follow. It has 104 signatories to date, and has also been endorsed by 6 national publishing associations. And then we also have the ABC International Excellence Award, which is awarded annually by ABC, and it recognizes outstanding leadership and achievements in advancing the accessibility of digital publications for persons who are print disabled. 2 of these awards are presented each year, one to a publisher and one for a project initiative. Most recently in 2020, it was awarded to Macmillan Learning for the publisher category, and Fondazione LIA for the project initiative category from Italy. Next slide, please. So the ABC Global Book Service is our third pillar, if you will. And this is also the project in which I'm most directly involved. It is the descendant of the TIGAR project that was previously mentioned. It is basically, it was developed as a library to library platform that would enable, by leveraging the Marrakesh Treaty, that would enable libraries that serve the blind and print disabled to share their resources, to upload their catalogs, and upon request to then share the digital files with other participating libraries in a sort of mutual exchange to create a collective shared library. And to leverage, in so doing, the Marrakesh Treaty. So the more countries implement the Marrakesh Treaty, the more libraries join the ABC Global Book Service, the more titles are available. So the number of titles, the volume of works that are available has increased quite rapidly. There are currently more than 660,000 titles in 80 languages, and 630,000 of those are available for cross-border exchange under the Marrakesh Treaty. We are very glad to count among our participants the Jamaica Society of the Blind, which joined, I believe, approximately a year ago. And through the Global Book Service, they currently have access for cross-border exchange for 28,000 titles that have been cleared for exchange through permissions, clearance, and so forth. But with accessing the Marrakesh Treaty, that number of titles available would jump up to the 630,000. So these titles that they could then obtain from Canada, from South Africa, the United Kingdom, Australia, all over the world, wherever there's a library that's participating. There are currently, I skipped ahead, but yeah, there are 92 libraries that have currently joined. And of course, there are several benefits, not only the secure exchange of digital files, the availability of titles in different languages and formats, but also it's a service that's offered free of cost. It's really in line with ABC's mission and JIPO's commitment to making these titles available to the visually impaired community. Building on this library-to-library platform, we just recently, on April 13th, so it's our 10-day anniversary, we just launched a platform, an application for visually impaired individuals. However, it is launched through the participating libraries, and it is also limited to within the countries that have implemented Marrakesh. So our initial launch was with 5 libraries in Canada, Switzerland, and France, with an initial catalog of 63,000 titles. And so the way it works is, as the participating libraries opt into the service, we ask them to upload the digital files in advance so that they can be available for immediate download for the beneficiary. The libraries then can make it available to their patrons. It's a brand new platform. It's just picking up speed now, but obviously we're very, very excited. And as with the library-to-library service, it has a bit of a snowball effect. So the more libraries join, the broader the catalog that's available, the selection of works that's available, and the more satisfying, the more useful it becomes to the patrons. We're in discussions with libraries that we're currently involved with for the library-to-library service. We're in discussions with libraries in all over the world, in the United States, Netherlands, New Zealand, and so forth. And we believe, that it's gonna increase quite fast. So that's sort of a quick overview of the applied ways in which the Marrakesh Treaty can be put into practice. I think that's it for my presentation. Maybe go to the next slide just to share our URL, our email. We are, of course, very happy to exchange and communicate with anyone who wishes. And we look forward to this discussion. And again, thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dominic. Thank you for that. I think it's really important, the work of the ABC. I didn't know it's so many titles in that collection there and so many countries, so I think it's a really useful resource for us to tap into. And that's where I would love for us to also, get some discussion going. So thanks for joining us and thanks for sharing that very useful information. All right, so I'm going to introduce our final speaker before we open the floor for our Q&A and discussion. We want to hear from Mr. Vivian Blake. Mr. Blake is a senior staff member at the Ministry of Education. He's education officer in a special education unit, Ministry of Education, Youth and Information. Mr. Blake has been working also on this issue for quite some time. There's a wealth of information and knowledge. And so we'd love to hear his perspective and contribution to this important topic. So welcome, Mr. Blake. Good morning, sir. Yes, there you are. You're off mute. Good morning, sir.
Morning to everyone.
Morning again.
All right, so thank you very much again, Dr. Goff and JIPO, for this opportunity I share today on behalf of my Assistant Chief Education Officer, Dr. Sharon Anderson Morgan. Actually, Dr. Goff and colleagues, we were supposed to have staff meeting today, and Dr. Goff, I don't know if it is your meeting, why the staff meeting is postponed, So you see the importance that is accorded to this occasion.
All right. Sir, thank you.
Firstly, though, I want to just start, having been a part of the process from probably a way back. I would want to say, having been a part of the whole, dealing with the whole issue of accessibility from a toddler when I would have lost sight. But this whole project of making information accessible, having been a part of it from 2003, it is important to highlight and to also share my voice in extending commendations to JIPO, who would have ensured that when the Copyright Act was being amended in 2015, that provisions were made for persons who are blind and visually impaired and otherwise who have other print disabilities, and persons who are deaf are included. So I want to extend commendations to them for that. I want to also say a special thanks for, all right, so the colleagues who were not here previously, we had a meeting last week and there were some issues, and I want to say JIPO has really been quite responsive, and that is why they would have changed the Zoom platform, which now enables me to be able to unmute myself quite independently, start my video quite independently, and also facilitate the interpretation services that are live now. I have a colleague here who is actually on, who is deaf, so I also want to say thank you to JIPO again for that. I also want to say the persistence, JIPO, and for listening, for having the attitude to listen. That is something commendable, especially, when many of us who would have lived, having a disability, You know, oftentimes we are subjected to situations where a person basically give us what they think is best for us without listening to our voice. You know, so that again is commendable. So you know, I want to put those things on behalf of it, on the table. You know, even though I'm speaking on behalf of my ACEO, I am also speaking as somebody who will potentially benefit from whatever provisions are made for persons with disabilities, persons with special needs, etc. I must also say, you know, I have been in this thing quite a while, as I mentioned up front, but I didn't even know that Jam Copy would have made, would have done some of the things that Miss Newman shared this morning, you know. So the work continues and the support is appreciated. The book industry I would have mentioned last week also. You know, it's refreshing hearing Mrs. West Blackwood, you know, having an understanding about the power of access to information for persons who have disabilities, you know, and who, without this kind of support, without these kind of initiatives, would to some great extent sometimes be disempowered and disadvantaged. So another thing I must mention, and you know, as we get further in the discussion, maybe more of this is going to mention. One of the things, especially that one of the good things that came out also of the Copyright Amendment Act is the naming of the Ministry of Education as an authorized entity. And although some of this would have taken place from probably 2015 with the last update of the Copyright Amendment Act, and people like me, I will say frankly that sometimes I am a little agitated because I don't think that we really have done enough with these provisions. Yet it seems that sooner than later, a time may be coming when, you know, we may be able to do more with these provisions. So I want to also acknowledge in this regard the naming of the Ministry of Education, Youth and Information as an authorized entity, thereby enabling us to do the necessary conversion to enable persons who have disabilities to have access to information, especially in the context of education, of course. The further amendments now to the Marrakesh Treaty is something very important, and I am happy that Mr. Matar spoke before me, and he would have highlighted the number of titles that persons are going to be able to have access to as a result of you know, us signing on to the Marrakesh Treaty. I want to share a very personal experience though. When I was in university, well, basically from secondary education, I have been, from secondary education, I have always been in the mainstream, all right? So high school, it was a mainstream school, meaning it was a regular high school. And then, of course, onto university. When I was in university, considerable portions of time were spent converting information from print, because many of the books we utilized, etc., were in print, right? So we had to either had somebody read for us, or we would have to scan it ourselves, and you know, we would have a program that would convert, do the requisite conversion. Now, I remember the UE Library at one point explored the whole thing of accessing information that was already out there that we could use. And you know that in Jamaica we use a lot of information, from overseas and stuff. And I remember exploring a couple of available options. One of them was an institution called, at the time it was called Reading for the Blind and Dyslexic. I think it's now Learning Alley, right? And I went to the librarian that was in charge at the time with a list of textbooks that students were using. And to my surprise, 90% of those textbooks were available on were already in accessible format done by Reading for the Blind and Dyslexic. But guess what? We couldn't access them. We couldn't access them. So, but they were there, and being able to access them would have saved us considerable portions of time, a considerable time that was spent converting this kind of information. So I'm saying that to say that, I'm not sure if that time we would have had the Marrakesh Treaty as yet. Well, the Copyright Amendment Act wasn't even amended. But I'm just sharing that story now to highlight also the importance of us signing up to the Marrakesh Treaty. Because if these kind of provisions were in place, many of those books that we would have spent hours scanning, we would not have had to. And who to tell, maybe some of us, maybe the grades that we got could have been much better, because we would have had some of the time spent scanning information, etc. We could have spent it studying, we could have spent it completing assignments and all of that. So, just thought I would share that. I just thought I'd share that just to emphasize, from a personal level, the importance of signing on to this Marrakesh Treaty. All right. Now, I mentioned earlier about, the ministry being named as an authorized entity, and the provisions, my being somewhat dissatisfied about, the fact that we probably have not fully taken advantage of the provisions, the Copyright Amendment Act, the provisions in the Copyright Amendment Act. But suffice it to say that in as much as these discussions are taking place, the special education unit in which I work was approached by UNICEF to collaborate on a project, an accessible digital textbook project, where in the first phase, it will be about developing protocol for making information accessible to the various segments of the population who are so disadvantaged. Inclusive of course, persons who are blind and visually impaired, the deaf community, as well as, I might say a little more on this further, but one of the things that we are also considering is how can we have this information also access to persons with intellectual disabilities. And it was touched on last week by Mrs. Spence Silvera, but I want to again highlight it in this space as something that we need to have conversations about. And it may not have implications so much for Marrakesh, but even for our own copyright amendment situation. I know more research probably is needed, so that we can be guided by what obtains in other jurisdictions. But it is a conversation that we need to have. The UNICEF initiative, I was asking my colleague, one of my colleagues who's here with me to share, but she was having some difficulty with the platform. I don't know if because she's not a presenter, she didn't get full access. But nonetheless, she will paste the link in the chat so that persons can find out more information about this accessible digital textbook initiative. All right, so that link will be shared by my colleague in the chat. So persons can go on and see exactly what it is like. It is something being undertaken in a couple other Latin American countries. And again, I think Jamaica participating will be groundbreaking, you know, because I am pretty sure we're going to be the first in the Caribbean to attempt this. Now, accessibility. As we speak about accessibility, one of the other points I also want to mention is that one of the things that the pandemic has taught us, you know, is the importance of moving information to electronic formats. And one of the things that we find is that oftentimes electronic formats are easier to convert. Well, a lot of times they are more accessible, and a lot of times, even if they are not, they are easier to convert. So you know that is something that is applicable to the community of persons with disabilities as it relates to the whole thing of the pandemic. And more, you know, it is something that we want our stakeholders to embrace, especially our publishers. I like the term used by Mr. Matar, accessible publishing. And Mr. Matar, maybe one of the things you can share about, and I'm sure, you know, hearing from the posture of Mrs. West Blackwood, it is something she would definitely be interested in. And it is maybe something, if you could give more information about how even the capacity building of aspect of that can be accessed, you know, so that we can get our publishers fully ready, you know, so that not only you know, not only that they make information accessible, but you know, even if there is any financial benefit to come from that they will also, because you know, as I have shared before, I have purchased I from time to time I have to purchase content, you know, and all of that. I know the market may be small, but you know, whatever, we know the market in Jamaica is small, but whatever financial benefit can redound, you know, we would love also to know that our publishers, you know, benefit fully from that. And of course, the Copyright Amendment Act makes provision for that. Now, as I wind up, I just want to put back some things on the table. These are some conversations that, yes, I know I have JIPO's commitment, Dr. Goff, you know, shared about, you know, the amendment of the Copyright Act to address the whole thing of the naming of authorized entity, so that the community can benefit optimally. The community of persons with disabilities can benefit optimally in terms of, you know, persons who may be in a position to do the requisite converting of the information that we require. So I put that on the table, and Dr. Goff has given, you know, JIPO's commitment in that regard. Another thing though that I want to put on the table, and I mean, in our question and answer, I don't know if, you know, persons out there, if it, you know, any ideas out there that persons can share. There have been initiatives in the past, but the initiatives might not have always been sustained as I would have liked, due to the whole issue of the funding, due to the whole issue of funding, and I also going to put in, you know, the whole issue of finding cost-effective ways of doing the requisite conversion to facilitate the access, the desired access. So I think two issues are there as we think about the sustaining of these initiatives: the funding and one of the things we have to think about, especially in our situation where funding is limited, how can we find more cost-effective ways of making the information accessible to the people who so badly need it? So those are just some things I want to put on the table for consideration, for discussion, for us to continue the conversation about. I also want to mention the needs of certain segments of the population. And again, I go back to the persons who have disabilities. I also go back to persons with intellectual disabilities, who is a specific segment of the population, again, who can be disenfranchised and disempowered and disadvantaged if information is not presented in a way to them that they are able to access. And as it is now, I am not certain that we have any copyright provisions, so persons with intellectual disabilities, for example, may require information being simplified for their, because intellectual disability, there are some intellectual deficits as a result, and sometimes information may be simplified. And that implication of that sometimes is that content, it might even require the modification of content, etc. I am putting it on the table though, since coming full-time into the whole issue of special ed, I know I came at this originally from the standpoint of somebody who is blind. I come at it also knowing about the community of persons who are deaf, etc. But this is the person with intellectual disabilities is also a segment of the population that can be disenfranchised and disadvantaged. And therefore, I want to put on the table the situation of such persons for consideration, for discussion, for conversation. Ladies and gentlemen, I thank you very much. And I close with a quote from Nerio and Batson, an article on accessible information. And they say accessible content, plain and simple, is better content for everyone. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Blake. Thank you very much for that, sir. Appreciate you giving that extensive, sharing of experiences and insights. Thanks for that. I think it's good for us to now segue into the Q&A discussion. So the floor is open. Mr. Blake has certainly put on the table some succinct issues of funding and sustainability and cost effectiveness, right? We've heard from Mr. Matar about the wide opportunities that exist under the JIPO ABC, Accessible Books Consortium. We heard from Ms. Carol Newman about the stance of JAMCOPY, a very facilitative stance that is encouraging and willing to work as well towards increasing access. And of course, from the BIJ, Book Industry Association of Jamaica, also very willing to partner towards these very worthy objectives. And we heard from Ms. Chantal English and from Ms. Shireen Gordon White earlier as well on the topic of how to really bridge the gap in this respect, right? And so I think we're all on board with this. Just need to now look at some of the logistics and some of maybe the more technicalities of how to implement in a practical way. But the floor is open, please. Any questions or any comments for any of our panelists? Please feel free to ask it now. Yes, Ms. Myrna Douglas, good afternoon. Good morning, Ms. Douglas. Please go right ahead and ask your question. You should be able to unmute and ask. Ms. Douglas, please. Is Ms. Douglas there? Ms. Douglas, are you able to? Okay, do we lose Ms. Douglas? Is English, sir? I saw Ms. Douglas a while ago. No? Maybe not. I thought I saw it. Hand up. I'm not seeing her now.
No, not seeing her.
Okay. All right. Mr. Blake. Mr. Blake's hand is up.
All right, so morning again. Well, I'm just again, introducing what I had said, and I don't know if it was thought maybe as I would have liked. I don't know if Mr. Matar can give further information regarding accessing the capacity building. And I'm thinking about this maybe at various levels. I'm thinking about the publishers, for example, benefiting from the whole thing of accessible publishing. If some kind of well, I don't know if it involves training. I don't know the kind of training that would be involved, and any other way that this kind of support can be leveraged to the community as we think about creating accessible information. So I don't know if Mr. Matar is still here, and
yes, he is.
He would want to speak to that more extensively. Thank you.
Yes, he is. Yes, he is. Mr. Matar?
Yes. Hi, Vivian. Thank you for that question. Let me try to answer that as best I can. The capacity building framework for within ABC, so it operates, as I mentioned, in 2-year cycles, and it's really in response to submissions. So when we put out a call for submissions, then we receive a number of proposals from organizations around the world, and this is specifically targeted towards training and technical assistance in developing countries. So the type of project really ranges depending on what has been submitted. And then basically in response to those, we would make available the training and the resources as needed on a project by project basis. So it's not a plan of implementing. It's not a single plan for accessible publishing per se. It's really in response to the types of requests that we get. But in combination with that, we have the work that we're also doing for promoting accessible publishing in a more general way through the ABC Charter and through the efforts we do in discussions with publishers, so that born accessible documents is taken on as a paradigm, so that you shouldn't have to be encoding, you shouldn't have to be scanning and changing the format and applying text to speech readers. It should be all documents should be born accessible in the ideal world. So ABC's approach is to really work with publishers in that respect. And in terms of the capacity building, again, it's more on a case-by-case basis, depending on what kind of proposals we receive. I'm not sure if that completely answers your question.
All right, 2 specific questions in response to that. One, can government entities apply for this kind of funding support? That's one. And 2, so for more information, we would have to get more information from the JIPO website, I am assuming.
Yeah, I'm not sure I have the answer to that, to be honest. The best thing to do is to to receive the call for proposals when they come in, when they go out. I mean, because that's where the my personal area of involvement is more in the Global Book Service, so I'm not aware of the details of how the calls for proposals go, unfortunately.
Right. Okay. Thanks for that, Mr. Blake and Mr. Matar. So we make a note of that, Mr. Blake. I think it's a very important question as to what's available, through WIPO. Certainly, as a member state, Jamaica being a member state of WIPO, what's available to the government and also through the government to other non-government organizations as well. So certainly, I think it is critical to find out through the WIPO ABC the extent of support and capacity building, as you say, that's available, to ensure sustainability. All right, I see two hands up from Ms. Myrna Douglas and from Mr. Boucher. So Ms. Douglas, you want to go ahead, please? And then Mr. Boucher.
Yes, are you hearing me, guys?
Yes, we're hearing you clearly.
Okay, just a comment and a question. My comment is about Mr. Blake, Vivian Blake's concerns as it relates to being able to have access to the information. And I noticed Mr. Boucher is on. Mr. Boucher recently suggested that perhaps websites should be made compliant for this kind of access to the website, because many websites that you observe, they are not necessarily compliant, and that the icons and the links are not placed in a standard location on these websites for the visually impaired or the visually challenged. And Mr. Blake should also be mindful of the copyright law, which gives very generous access to information to transfer from print to the electronic format, into alternate format. And as such, that kind of access is embraced by the legislation. My question now is about the book industry. For example, I believe that we need to emphasize more about copyright and intellectual property being assets which may not necessarily be tangible, copyright intangible, but they're assets which we must protect and monitor and also make accessible to advance innovation. In terms of that as well, I believe that if companies begin to put intellectual property on their books in their accounting, in terms of valuing that would also give some emphasis to development institutions such as banks and so on that can fund various projects, because access to information is not treated the way that roads or water development is treated. And as such, we need that kind of emphasis internationally in order to reconcile with being able to get funding to advance access to information. And we see the challenges as it relates to the telecommunication system in the education sector. And if we had that kind of emphasis similar to how there can be funding provided for road and water and all those other infrastructure, that is where I believe that we should start. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Douglas. I think there's definitely, as you say, a role for all concerned, particularly, of course, government, which is, where we're trying to, our network and stakeholders, to form a partnership, an alliance that can get this done, not just from the law, but as you say, on the ground. But thanks for your suggestions. I think that, where we are now with the several stakeholders, I know you mentioned Jam Copy as well, and certainly, the government, and of course, the flexibilities in the Copyright Act. So I think it's a matter of using the legal tools and the electronic or technological tools to be able to, try to see what's possible. Of course, what we're trying to do with the law is to facilitate now the importation, right, of these format copies so that we wouldn't have to then, maybe pursue the expense and the cost of trying to adapt them ourselves, right, to convert them ourselves, but to really access what's available already out there. it's already been formatted or converted, you know, that may be easier, more sustainable for Jamaica, you know. Or Mr. Boucher, you want to go ahead, sir, please?
Yes, sir, Goff. Thanks for having me.
Yes, ma'am.
So the first question is for Dominic. I don't know if I somehow missed it, but that ABC accessible publishing, I wanted to know for academic libraries like the UMONA who have visually impaired persons as our patrons, how could we access that ABC portal or even direct our people there? So that's for Dominic. If you don't mind, I have a concern here as it relates to the copyright amendment. I hear you when you say yeah, most things should be born digital, and we should be able to access the born digital through the amendment. But I just guess I needed some clarity and I guess some peace of mind too. First of all, what does the current amendment say? The other thing is, can we ensure that, because I'm now tapping into Mr. Blake's concern about ensuring that we craft the terms in a way that it has enough bandwidth to be an umbrella term for as many people as can benefit, you know? So that term, I definitely don't envy you if you have to craft that term. The other one is the most suitable format, because from the little experience I have in the past, what happened was we had to transcribe digitally in a particular format, and that was DAISY, the Digital Accessible Information System. Essentially, it was on paper a very good thing, but when our blind users in a developing country like Jamaica started using the DAISY, they had a lot of problems because it was proprietary and it required additional downloads. The third thing is the authorized entities. If that can be as broad as well, I don't mean to be selfish here, to include academic libraries or anybody who serves a print disabled person. As I said, we want it as wide as possible because the research has shown that things like digital talking books help dyslexic people. And if the term is not wide enough, we could be excluding those people. All right. I wanted to speak to Mr. Blake's concern about the most cost-effective way of providing accessible resources. And I think this is it's kind of a no-brainer. It really, for a country again like Jamaica, we have to be mindful of our environment and our financial realities. Digital improvisations will have to be the most economic, but not necessarily the most convenient. And it goes, that's why going back to the whole amendment and how it speaks and its language, it has to be open to any improvisation electronically that can help blind people. As I said before, DAISY is good, very navigable, but our people had to buy DAISY players, which was very expensive, or they had to have smartphones and download it from the DAISY consortium, etc. Let me just recap, Mr. Goff, sorry. So the first one was for Dominic, how can we get those books? The second one is really all about the amendment. Thanks.
Right, Mr. Boucher, thank you very much, sir. Good insight from the UAE Muna Library there. So yes, Mr. Matar, Dominic, please.
Sure. So the accessible books, the Global Book Service is available to any organization that meets the definition of authorized entity according to the Marrakesh Treaty. That's the framework under which it was made available. So I would encourage you to contact us at ABC and so that we can explore that possibility. Another option always being to collaborate with other entities that may fit the definition, such as the Jamaican library for the blind, and it's possible that through collaboration with them, there could be some way to make it happen. But what I would encourage you to do is to contact us. Through the address that was on my presentation or on our website, so that we can explore whether that's how that can be done, basically.
Thanks, Dominic. And just to assure Mr. Boucher that yes, I mean the law does not prescribe, any like a closed criteria for access for authorized entity, right? Nor does it have a closed criteria for the type of technology that can be used, so it doesn't prescribe that it's only this or that technology. So certainly, if we can utilize open access or, open source software, or which maybe we don't need proprietary permission, or again, with the law now in place, then you wouldn't also need permission from the corporate owner as well in that respect, so long as it's being done for the exception for making access for blind or deaf persons, so that it's open, we can develop our own, even so, might be better, our own technologies to make it more accessible for our communities. But certainly, all that we can find out there that's available to help, we can use in the interest of our communities by virtue of the Copyright Act exceptions, So it is quite broad. It's just for us now to use the space that we have, use the access and the opportunities we have locally and overseas, I think, to make it happen, Mr. Boucher, you wanted to come up with something quickly?
Yeah, just quickly, Dr. Goff, I think the attendant matter is the whole matter of digital rights management, because I do expect that in return, the publishers will ask for protection. And that's one of the challenges we've always had too, is protecting their items. And that's why we were boxed into using I hate to use the term box, but this is why we opted to use the DAISY format. And it was because it was one of the few formats that also has an early level of protection embedded in it. But I would say digital rights management, I think, is going to come at us, meaning we're going to have to upload these resources and have some repository and guarantee the publishers that only print disabled persons will be accessing that. And we may have to prove that. I'm imagining. So I would want some help with that.
All right, good discussion, good concern. I mean, the act is intended, of course, to deal with that as well as is the Marrakesh Treaty. So the treaty says, and our act says, that yes, digital rights management should not be a hindrance or an obstacle to accessing these works for blind and deaf persons, right? So that in that context, you would not be restricted legally. Of course, you may have some other access obstructions if it is that you maybe need to get a password or code or maybe a geographical, as I say, digital rights management, restrictions and that kind of thing. But you would be able to, go around those or circumvent those, again, without the copyright owner's consent. Of course, we're trying to encourage a partnership in this respect. And so if you have the corporation of the copyright owners through Jam Copy and or BIAJ, then, I think we wouldn't have that as a concern either way. So I see Miss Blackwood's hand, Latoya's hand up. I'd love to have her come in on this, please.
Yes. So unfortunately, I have to jump off the discussion to honor other commitments for the day in a few, but just wanted to jump in before I leave to say that, again, just value the discussion because getting a lot of different perspectives, international, local, regional, and making some notes in terms of points of action. So I agree with some of the sentiments. Vivian touched on it, Kevin, and others in terms of one of the things I'm seeing out of this discussion is just some information sharing, collaboration, just in terms of us being on the same page as to what is working right now, what's not working, and why it's not working, so we can take some action on that. For the PIAJ, one of the things that we will work to do more in is just the education of our members in terms of what they can do right now without the work that we know we have to do in terms of getting to the stage of signing the treaty or making any other provisions in the existing copyright framework. So definitely accept that. And what I would love is I'm figuring that the recording will be made available post this event. I will definitely be sharing it with our members who were not able to attend, just so that they can hear first hand, outside of my summary, what are some of always say, a lot of what we're trying to do right now, some of it is pioneering in terms of what we're going to be doing in the context of the Caribbean region, but certainly there are best practices and international models that we can look at crafting to our cultural, social, and economic circumstances to make them work. So it's not about reinventing the wheel all the time. It's about looking for the things that are at that level. They're best practices, as I say, and they work and they benefit the community that they're intended to. So as usual, I am open for those who want to reach out to me directly post this one. I'm just gonna drop my contact details in the chat. And I welcome, just continuing the discussions. And as I said, the education, both internal and public education.
It's important. Right. Thank you very much, Latoya. Always very open. Chairman of BIAJ, a book publisher herself, right? So please feel free to contact her as well. She's making her contacts publicly available. And as I say, Mr. Boucher, I think thankfully, we're past some of the maybe foreseen tensions that may exist, because I think, as I said, this is a topic, an issue that we are, all, committed to find solutions to. So we shouldn't have, I think, any concerns there. What I think we can focus on is how to get the technology, as I said, to those who would want to and need to have it, to be able to get the accessible formats to those who need it, and so we're very glad as well to have the UWI Mono Library represented by Ms. Douglas as well, and Mr. Boucher with us too. Okay, so the floor is open. Any more comments? I see Ms. Latoya has shared in the chat her details. Yes, so any more comments or questions from the panelists? Mr. Blake, I see your hand is up.
Yes, I just wanted to respond though. I must say upfront, colleagues, I bat for the community of which I am a part. I bat for the community very strongly, But I also want to put on the table that property myself. And I am very mindful about, that as persons from the community, we should take all steps to protect the owners of the copyright and the creators of the copyright, etc. I am definitely for that. I'm saying that though in the context because Mr. Boucher raised the issue about digital rights management, and it's an important issue and it should not be overlooked. One of the things I want to say is it can almost sound like we can get discriminatory in that if it is that you are going to be required to prove certain things because you are providing a service to somebody with a disability, isn't that discriminatory? A person can just get up and go buy an e-book and nobody cares and I'm not gonna say that he does what he wants to do, but that person is not monitored, and people are not so concerned about what that person can do with that e-book. You know, even when you're a part of certain libraries now, right? Certain students, for example, they probably even you allow you to scan and convert things to digital formats and all of that. And as I said earlier, this is one of the things that has come out of this COVID pandemic. You know, is the whole thing that a lot more information has to be shared electronically. So I just want to put that on the table, though, you know, that discriminatory in that we want this proof because it's somebody with a disability, but somebody without that doesn't have a disability can just get an e-book anywhere, and you don't have to prove anything. You don't have to take any steps, you know, regarding any extra steps regarding digital rights management. You know,
Right.
we need to be careful.
I understand with you, Mr. Blake, fully. And again, I think this was discussed at JIPO, you know, in the context of the Marrakesh Treaty being negotiated, you know, and so the aim is to improve access, to make access easier, and so we don't want to create additional hurdles or obstacles. And so I should say that, I mean, the treaty does not require authorized entities to, you know, to basically have to prove, you know, but they are legally, of course, obliged to ensure that they only make accessible format copies for the use and benefit of persons who are entitled, which is persons who are from the blind community under the Marrakesh Treaty and under our law, persons who are blind or deaf, right? So that there is an obligation to ensure that these exceptions to copyright are being used for the limited purpose only of affording access, right? But there's no obligation, positive obligation on member states or unauthorized entities to basically keep a log and to, you know, prove that it's only. But how it would work is that if it is that an authorized entity is not, you know, acting within the context of the law and are going over what are the allowed exceptions under the act, then the copyright owner or owners would have the legal right to seek recourse against the authorized entity, right? And or the individual persons who have received that work who are not using it in accordance with the act, right? So it would be the duty on the copyright owners to enforce their copyright rights if they feel that they are being infringed, and the duty on those who are taking advantage of the exceptions to ensure that they do not infringe copyright. So it's a balance that JIPO is, as the GOJ agency, tasked to maintain between, of course, the copyright rights of the owners and the reasonable exceptions in the public interest, you know, but the law strikes that balance. And I think that, again, we're all concerned now. We are understanding of that balance, you know, and there doesn't seem to be any conflict from what I have heard from the stakeholders on board with us here. So we heard from Latoya earlier. I see Carol's hand is up. Ms. Newman, I'm going to ask her to also speak to that as well.
Thank you, Marcus. And you made some of the points that I was going to make. There is the need for access to information by all. That is accepted. There is need for a balance of both the interest of the rights holder and the interest of the public, the reading public. And by reading public, I mean all inclusive here. And the Copyright Act provides that balancing for us. That is the purpose of the Copyright Act. So inherent in the Copyright Act are those obligations on the part of the user to be able to access the information, but to access it responsibly. And so, as you mentioned, Marcus, there are obligations on behalf of those authorized entities to ensure that this responsibility to create and facilitate access to a particular set of users is being done in a responsible way and with regard for the rights of the persons who have created it, the work in the first place. So just to underscore that the Copyright Act provides that balancing mechanism for both sides. I also wanted to say in relation to what Mr. Blake mentioned about the increased need for access to materials during this pandemic. This is something that was recognizable, instantly recognizable by the publishing community, both locally and abroad. And steps were taken very early on in the pandemic to expand the limits of allowable for copying under our licenses. So, for example, back using the Mona campus of the UE as an example again, under our license, as I mentioned, there is an obligation, there is the permission given to be able to convert materials without payment. And those limits, as with the other aspects of the license, provisions of the license, were expanded at the start of the pandemic. So whilst under the standard for a license from JAMCopy is that one is allowed to copy up to 20% or a chapter, whichever is greater, the limit was expanded to up to 3 chapters and up to 35% of the material, of the publication. And these considerations were given without any additional charge in the term in relation to normal publications and normal copying. And of course, it was expanded as well for the blind and visually impaired persons without any charge. So there was recognition of the challenges that came with the pandemic, and the publishers and creators recognized this and made these allowances and granted these expansions. And as I said, this was not only in Jamaica, but in other countries as well. Certainly those entities that were affiliated with the International Federation of Reproduction Rights Organizations.
Thanks very much, Ms. Newman. Right, so again, I think we're on the same page, you know. I think it's just, to me, a matter of how we can now activate, you know, the theory and the objectives, you know, towards, again, our practical implementation. And that's why we did have a meeting, a pre-webinar meeting last week, just to kind of, you know, get the stakeholders together. And we are intending as JIPO to continue to facilitate this so that we can, again, continue beyond IP week to see how we can play a meaningful role to get the proposed plans into motion, right? With the help of the ABC and JAMCopy, BIAJ, you know, JIPO, of course, UEMONA, National Library of Jamaica, Ministry of Education, Youth and Information, and all of the stakeholders, I say, who we have, you know, assembled with a common interest, you know. All right, so time is upon us. What I'm going to do now then is just to invite our early speakers. I'm going to invite Mrs. Gordon-White, Ms. Shireen Gordon-White, Vice Principal of the Salvation Army School for the Blind. She has any final comments or purposes to share with us. I'd invite her to do so now. And then I'll ask Ms. Chantal English to say a few final words from JIPO. So, Ms. Gordon-White, are you there? I don't know if you wanted to share anything as we wrap up.
Yes, I just want to say, it's step for persons who are blind and disabled, But what we really need now is the help to transcribe these things to accessible format. Also, as I said before, that if publisher could be made mandatory to transcribe these things to make it accessible to us, that would be if we have to pay, like what Mr. Blake said, even say like for the two persons who are sighted, if we could be able to even purchase these printed materials in accessible form, the persons who are blind and visually impaired in accessible form, that will be something great. And I must say thank you to Special Education Unit, because the unit has been working with us and doing their best to make some of these material into accessible format for us. But in the past, the unit was hindered by the accessibility because of copyright. So we are happy now that they can do more for the school, which they have been doing. So thank you very much, and thank you for making us part of this discussion.
Right, our pleasure, and thanks for joining us too. I'm looking forward, of course, to continued engagement, as I say, towards the objectives of this discussion. Ms. English, I'd love to hear from you to just say a few final words as well before we wrap up.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Goff. I want to say a special thanks to all the persons who took the time to join us this morning in this conversation. I believe it was a very robust discussion and very fruitful. And at JIPO, we certainly will do our best to address the concerns that were raised this morning. I heard Mr. Blake mentioning that he's a creative. I'd also like to extend all the creatives online that they can register their work with us at JIPO, whether it be trademark, patents, designs, GIs, and also to access the voluntary copyright registration service that we offer here at JIPO. So just want to say thanks again for joining, and that we look forward to continued work with the disabled communities. And more so, even after IP Week, we will continue this discussion and collaboration as best as possible to create access to copyrighted materials.
Thank you, Ms. English. Thank you very much. So we're launching a poll. You see it online now. You can just take a few seconds to answer. So only a few questions that you'll be asked, just to have us get some feedback, so that we can, of course, continue to improve our service. So please take a few moments before you leave just to complete the answers for the poll. If you can, we'd appreciate that. For those who are not able to see it, you can, of course, always share feedback as well with us. But we thank you for your participation today. And we do look forward, as I say, to continuing this discussion in the context of just the objective that we hope to achieve further on this year, involving the Copyright Act, but also, as I say, involving creating partnerships, right, that we have already established and have in place, that we can work towards collaboratively towards the end game for us to have increased access. And of course, as I say, although we're working in the context of the Marrakesh Treaty and the Copyright Act, our focus is not limited to the blind. And so similarly, we want to find solutions that can fit the deaf community as well and improve their access to copyright works for sure. And so we're aware that there may be less resources in that area, maybe less established cooperative arrangements available in that area. And so we're also committed to trying to find solutions for members of the deaf community as well. Because I said certainly the Act does provide for those members of the community. So we also want to be able to have a practical way to implement that legal provision on the ground here in Jamaica. Right, so thanks again very much to all who participated. I think that going forward, we're going to probably call upon many of you, just for insights, whether from your perspective as a member of the disabled community, or from a member of a library institution, or from someone who's working in technology in the area. All this I think is important to bring together to see how we can best put the law and technology and really creative linkages, right, in place to have the communities increase their access to their livelihoods, their standard of education, and of quality of life, right, to be enjoyed through copyright works. So thanks again to our panelists, Mrs. Shireen Gordon-White. Thanks to our in-house poet, Ms. Janicia Wright, Ms. Chantal English, our copyright and related rights manager, Ms. Latoya West Blackwood, who had to leave, but for again a very facilitative stance on behalf of the BIAJ, Ms. Carol Newman of Jam Copy, a critical and key partner with us in copyright broadly and on this task in particular, and Mr. Dominic Matar from JIPO ABC, and Mr. Vivian Blake, of course, also from the Special Education Unit in the Ministry of Education and Information. We also want to, of course, point out that World Copyright Day continues. So this afternoon, we will be sharing stories with members of the blind community. The Salvation Army School for the Blind will be reading books virtually for children who are part or who are members of that school. And so we'll be doing that as well to, just share the joy of reading, of storytelling, so forth. I want to thank UNESCO as well for their participation and support as always. Ms. Mary Hopkinson for her presentation, her pre-recorded greetings. I want to thank also, of course, the JIPO team, the IP Week Planning Committee and team, JIPO staff, our executive director, the ministry. I want to thank JIPO for their partnership as well, particularly Ms. Carol Simpson. And I look forward to, of course, a week of activities with IP Week. We have our IP Week church service on Sunday, 11:30. So feel free to join us as well. You can stay in the comfort of your home and celebrate and worship with us. And then we have our IP Week launch, World IP Day, IP Week launch on Monday morning at 9 o'clock Jamaica time. We'll be having an opening ceremony where we'll be having the Director General of JIPO join us. We're having the Executive Director of the European Union IP Office, as well as Minister Aldi Shaw, Minister of Industry, Information and Commerce here from Jamaica. And we'll be joined as well by MSMEs, as I said, from Jamaica, from JMEA, Mr. Samara Howell, and also Mr. Oral Shaw from the ministry, talking about the MSME benefits to be enjoyed by or through the government. And we'll also be joined by MSMEs from Malawi and Uganda. Sorry, Malawi and the UK on Monday. That will wrap up and round off for us World IP Day. But please check us www.jipo.gov.jm for further details about IP Week and the activities that we have planned for you. Follow us also JIPO online on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, LinkedIn, and all available platforms. Have a fabulous weekend, everyone, and stay safe. And please join us back right here at 9 a.m. on Monday morning. So I want to thank, of course, everyone who has participated, the audience, and for all of our partners as well overseas. Thank you very much for staying with us.
YouTube, Instagram, I believe Twitter as well. So you can just go over there and just follow us, and you can always see the live event.
So yes, it was recorded. You can see a copy of this on our website and our platforms from next week. And for the information, of course, updates, anything you missed also in the past, our webinar series is also available online. You can, in your own time, catch up on your IP knowledge and information. Okay, thanks very much. Enjoy your Friday, enjoy your weekend. This is also this is right, the 23rd of April, we're becoming Copyright Day. Enjoy the day, and we see you all next week.
Morning.
Hi, good morning, how are you?
I'm good, and you?
I am doing okay.
Awesome.
I'm here to copyright a trademark for my patent.
You want to copyright a trademark for your patent?
Yes.
Alright, tell me exactly what it is that you want to do.
I have a logo and I want to get it registered.
Okay, so that's a copyright, not patent. That's actually a trademark. So logos are trademarks.
Oh, so you're telling me that all I need is just a trademark?
Yes, that's all you need.
You know, it's a little confusing. I would hope that you guys would have some form of workshop or webinar or something.
Yes,
just to inform us of what is happening.
It is, and I'm happy that you said that because we will be having our IP week this week, our annual IP week, starting the 23rd of April until the 2nd of May. We will be on all the social media platforms, Facebook,
Thank our interpreters too.
Instagram, I believe Twitter as well. So you can just go over there and just follow us, and you can always see the live events that are going to be happening.
And what's the date again?
The 23rd of April until the 2nd of May.
Oh, thank you. I will surely be there.
You are most welcome. Please do go ahead and follow us, all right?
Okay, I will.
All right, let me just see your documents, please. All right, you just have a seat over there, and I'll get someone to assist. Morning.
Hi, good morning. How are you?
I am good, and you?
I am doing okay.
Awesome.
I'm here to copyright a trademark for my patent.
You want to copyright a trademark for your patent?
Yes.
All right, tell me exactly what it is that you want to do.
I have a logo and I want to get it registered.
Okay, so that is copyright, not patent. That's actually a trademark. So logos are trademark.
Oh, so you're telling me that all I need is just a trademark?
Yes, that's all you need.
You know, it's a little confusing. I would hope that you guys would have some form of workshop or webinar or something.
Yes,
just to inform us of what is happening.
It is, and I'm happy that you said that because we will be having our IP week this week, our annual IP week, starting the 23rd of April until the 2nd of May. We will be on all the social media platforms, Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, I believe Twitter as well. So you can just go over there and just follow us, and you can always see the live events that are going to be happening.
And what's the date again?
The 23rd of April until the 2nd of May.
Oh, thank you. I will surely be there.
You are most welcome. Please do go ahead and follow us, all right?
Okay, I will.
All right, let me just see your documents, please. All right, you just have a seat over there, and I'll get someone to assist.
Copyright and Related Rights Manager here at the Jamaica Intellectual Property Office. Every year we celebrate Intellectual Property Week in the last week of April. We also celebrate World Book and Copyright Day, April 23rd every year. Now this year we'll be focusing on creating copyright compliance through access, the Marrakesh Treaty. And the Marrakesh Treaty focuses on access to works, published work for persons who are blind or visually impaired. So we are inviting you to join the conversation this Friday at 10 a.m. to 12 p.m. where we will be focusing on the disabled communities. Participants include Executive Director Ms. Leclerc Bellamy, Mrs. Dolary Hopkinson, Public Educational Documentalist at the Jamaica National Commission, UNESCO, Mr. Vivian Blake, Education Officer from the Special Education Unit at the Ministry of Education, Ms. Shireen Gordon, Vice Principal of the Salvation Army School for the Blind, Mrs. Latoya Blackwood Meeks, Chairman of the Book Industry Association of Jamaica, BIAJ, Ms. Carol Newman, General Manager from the Jamaica Copyright Licensing Agency, JAMCOPY, and we also have representatives from the World Intellect